Hi, and welcome to Lessons with Cameron. In this video, I plan on discussing the differences between the 6-string steel string guitar, the nylon string classical guitar, and the electric guitar. First thing I want to do is go ahead and go over the parts of the instruments and show you kind of the fundamental differences. Now, first we have the head, the neck, and the body. Every guitar will have these components. For the most part, there's a few specialties that manage to remove the head, for example, or have cut the body down into very minimal size, but every part's still typically there. On the head, we have the tuning keys and the posts. The posts are going to be one of the easier identifiers for the difference between a nylon string and a steel string. Now, obviously, the first and easiest difference is steel strings on a steel string guitar and nylon strings on a nylon string guitar. Typically, in classical music, on a guitar, one voice will be found in the nylon strings and one or two more voices in the bass strings, or vice versa. So it's a good way to differentiate between the two voices. We have the nylon voices, and we have the steel string. Together, they give us a fairly decent tonal separation. The nylon string guitar has a slightly different construction, with the posts being mounted inside the headstock rather than coming out the front. It also has a wider, flatter neck as compared to a steel string acoustic or an electric, with the electric typically being the slimmest neck of them all. Also, the nylon string acoustic has a smaller body shape than the steel string acoustic, though it does have a bigger body than the electric. An example of some classical guitar appropriate for an instrument like this would be something like this. The steel string acoustic guitar does have a pretty dramatically different sound. It is used typically more for folk and alternative music, as well as a lot of more modern musics, since the steel string guitar is just a more modern instrument. It has a vibrance and a brightness that you don't get with the nylon string classical, which has more warmth and has a more intimate sound. Whereas this thing can be strummed away and can be delicately picked as well, but it will never have that subtle sweetness that you find in the nylon string. steel string electric can be plucked more gently, but will always have that brighter bell-like tone. Now the third kind of guitar that you might be considering would be an electric guitar. And I brought one out here to kind of go over some of the basic differences. The electric guitar is a little bit different than the other two guitars in the sense that it doesn't really have an acoustic volume. That's all you get. So without an amplifier, these things are kind of useless other than just practicing as far as getting your fingers together, but you won't be able to hear anything too interesting. Now I'm not going to set up an amplifier because I have made an entire video that covers the electric guitar from top to bottom, and you can link it somewhere. There'll be a little button around me somewhere and you can click it. Point is, go check out that video if you're interested in the electric guitar. It'll go into a greater detail and I don't have to do it again. So back to the steel string and the nylon string. And I played you a little bit on the classical and I played you a little bit on the steel string. Now the biggest difference between the two, of course, is going to be whether or not you should use a pick, because on a classical guitar you really should not use a pick. Now I call it a nylon string, I call it a classical, I call it a nylon string classical. All of these names are appropriate because they are all the same instrument and they do identify specifically a guitar with this design of headstock and with the wide flat neck with 3 nylon strings. The steel string acoustic is typically just referred to as an acoustic. So to make things easier, I call one the acoustic, steel string, that's the acoustic, and the classical, the nylon string. 99% of the time, people know what I'm talking about when I say it. The 1% of the time, I have to explain it. So, here is some of the key differences, I guess, would be the playability of them. Because of the wider neck and the flatter surface, it accommodates better reach for certain types of chords, whereas the smaller neck allows you to get different types of chords because the neck is smaller, so it just allows your hand to reach different ways. The multiple voicings that you play in classical music and some flamenco and some jazz would make the wider neck preferable, but really remember the forte of the nylon string really is in classical and flamenco guitar. So here is the same part played on both a steel string and a nylon string, so you can compare the sound of the two and get a better feel for what the differences are. And that was the steel string. And this is the nylon string. I hope you found this informative. That is going to give you the difference between the two main kinds of acoustic instruments in the guitar field, which are the classical string nylon guitar and the steel string acoustic, both of which, remember, are technically acoustic guitars, and they're really very similar, but they do very different jobs. So remember, if you're ready to take it on with your fingertips, get the steel string. If you're interested in classical flamenco guitar, get the nylon string. If size is an issue, the nylon string is your best bet. If it's not, the acoustic is a louder guitar. If you're going to be performing with them, the acoustic is probably a better bet, unless you're performing classical or flamenco. So it really is a kind of a style issue, more so than the sound. And that's why I recommend, if you do get into any kind of fingerstyle guitar, definitely get yourself a nylon guitar. Otherwise, for most people's applications, the steel string acoustic is probably the way to go. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you click the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. I know I usually play this out, but I don't happen to have a guitar in my hand, so.